Hello and welcome back. Today we are doing a pseudo tutorial, pseudo 1.9 Charters of Commerce update, talking about the winners and losers of this patch as it relates to tech. We are going to be going through each of the tabs one at a time, each of the sections, but before we do, I just wanted to kind of point out a couple of things. One, whenever we're evaluating techs, generally speaking, you can get all of the techs, so we're not making an evaluation as to which tech is better in the abstract. We are making an evaluation as to which tech is more important to prioritize and to research first. And secondly, we are talking about a sort of comparison to previous baselines, whether or not the techs are better or worse than before. So there's going to be a lot of techs that are worse than before but are still outstanding techs, and a lot of techs that were trash and are a lot better but are still not going to be worth actively researching perhaps. And so we'll try and point it out when that happens, but this is just something in general to keep in mind as we go through each of the tabs here. Alright, so first up we have the production tab. In general, this is moderately worse relative to military and society, but that's not because production techs have gotten nerfed in an absolute sense, but because the military and society ones are better. Also notable is the way that economies have shifted in 1.9 allows for more specialization. When you specialize more, this is going to make all the techs in this entire chain more polarized, and what we mean by that is it's going to be more important that you research the production techs of the industries you're specializing in, and less important that you research the ones that you are not specializing in. So if you have a really good company, let's say that is in motor industries early on and also has steel, it is going to be more important for you to research stuff like Bessemer process and open hearth process than it was before, because you are leaning into the things you have companies for. Now, with that in mind, there is kind of a scrum of what we often go for in the early game in the four techs: atmospheric engine, water tube boiler, mechanical tools, and railways. In general, I think that these four techs have gotten a lot worse relative to your other options because previously these were the absolute first rush sort of techs in a lot of situations. In particular, the mining, if you do focus on mines and you have a mine company, it is still an outstanding tech. Atmospheric engine pump is still really, really good, but I think that in general, that you open with it instead of maybe opening with going for a company is a question that has left to be answered, and companies are really, really good. And so I think that atmospheric engine pump is going to be not as good, and water tube kind of is probably actually going to be relatively the same, because if you choose to go for a resource-oriented company and you already have that company, once you get Atmo engine, you just kind of go right into water tube boiler and you prioritize it. Now, mech tools into railways I think is considerably worse, because now the port gives infrastructure, and the port is more efficient produces more value per construction than the railway does. And so it's a more efficient in terms of profitability source of infrastructure, although the railway is more per construction efficient at providing infrastructure. But also in particular, I do think that the building of ports, helping out your trade early on, is particularly good. I think trade early on in general is kind of strong, and so this is a general intuition. Still need more testing on that front to have a relatively small sample size, but for a lot of countries, if you have stuff on the coast, the need to rush railways just to provide infrastructure is significantly diminished, and so the pattern of going for mech tools into railways is not really what it used to be. Electrical generation. Power plants have been bad for a while, and they got absolutely kneecapped. They now produce less electricity, they actually produce less electricity. They only use 1/5 of the workers. You can see here, the number of workers they use is relatively small, so on a per worker basis, electricity got buffed, which is nice because now the power plants will actually employ up. However, on a per construction basis, they are like in between a third and a fourth the efficiency that they used to be. So dumping your construction into power plants when it's an 800 cost construction building feels super, super bad. So I think that electricity is going to just generally be one that you put off more than you did before. I think that combustion engine did get a little bit better, not way better. Now it unlocks the new automotive industries building. In terms of efficiency per construction, this is a reasonably good building. It uses oil as an input, though, and it's a decent oil sink. And then on top of this, you do get public motor carriages for your urban centers, so there's good ways of producing demand. And then more importantly, you also get combustion engine derricks for the oil rigs, which is a huge upgrade from the previous PM for the oil rigs. And so I think that combustion engine is going to look quite a bit better because before, motor industries were not a very efficient industry, and so going for automobiles by building more motor industries felt bad. But now that they're separated, going for just more automobiles doesn't tie you into going into more motor industries. And so I do think that this is a little bit better, and you can sort of control the amount of loud cars outside that you are producing a little bit more effectively. Also, generally speaking, the curve on the explosives PMs is much better. It's going to be much better early on in terms of your industry for the explosives factories, and so this is going effectively a buff for both nitroglycerin and dynamite, especially if you are choosing to specialize in either of those industries or in the any of the mining industries, because that will also help out quite a bit. Another thing to note is we've talked a little bit about specialization just in general, and specializing is a little bit better, which means you're going to be able to hit the economies of scale cap earlier, which is going to make it independent of if you are going clothing industry, which of course sewing machines is great for sewing industry. It's going to make the two techs that give you additional economies of scale cap a lot better. If you're hitting the economy of scale cap, Mech Workshop is very good. So if you're already hitting 20 buildings, Mech Workshop getting you up to 30 is incredibly good. We won't go over the math, but getting up to economies of scale mathematically is really efficient on your construction basis. And then of course a shift work as well, giving plus 20 to the economy of scale a building cap. So the overseas construction malice, I can't remember if it's 25 or 33%, but whatever it is, you are going to be a little bit more polarized in your strategy regarding construction sectors, however that plays out, because if you stack a bunch of construction sectors overseas, this will give you more construction efficiency, overcoming that malice much more effectively. So you either want to stack them high overseas, or you don't want to build overseas at all, and you stack them back home. And throughput effectively allows you to control where your construction sectors are a little bit better. It's not very effective for reducing the cost of construction, but it's effective for being more precise in where your construction is overseas relative to at home. This is relatively small, and these techs weren't very good before, but in particular, I think reinforced concrete is actually a lot better for a kind of weird roundabout reason, which is that it is significantly better to build the skyscraper now. You need both the steel frame construction and reinforced concrete in order to build the skyscraper, and the reason for this is the PM for trade nexus. I do think 25% trade capacity and 25% trade advantage is particularly strong, and so I think all of this combined makes this tech one that you don't that you maybe actively want to research now, where previously it was like an almost always skip over. The fact that you can unlock the skyscraper PM or the ability to build a skyscraper, I do think has its advantages now for the reinforced concrete tech. Not that it needed any buffing, but compression ignition is now considerably stronger. It was always strong because diesel pump was really good on the mines, but now you also get access to the mass production PM for the automotive industries, which doubles the output of automobiles, doesn't quite double the inputs that are required for this, but this actually makes the automotive industries the most efficient manufactured good per construction and per worker by an enormous margin, but per construction by also a considerable margin over tools, which is something like 80 something efficiency per construction, and this is going to be 115 per construction, mildly edging out small arms industries, which are hard to produce en masse, unlike the automotive industries, which are really easy to stack a lot more of. That was like 113 per construction. This is 115 per construction. It's absolutely insane as kind of endgame industry, and it's tagged onto one of the best, if not the best, tech previously going into this patch. All right, next up, we have the military tech tree, which is relatively straightforward. The Navy techs in general have gotten considerably better, and also going for stats rather than input goods is now considerably better. Previously, I think that what I would do is I would just go for as many torpedo boats as possible because they had the best inputs, because they did not use ammunition as an input, which was an ineffective input, and you would just max out kind of the torpedo boats, get your fat stack for landing, and you would crush the enemy AI. And the AI was always crushable because what it would do is, for navies, if you have multiple admirals, what would happen is the stack would get split between the two. So in this case, it would split, 20 or around 12 ships in one battle and another 13 in another battle. And what the AI would do is they would recruit a ton of admirals and all their forces would get split. So you'd get hyper favorable battles. You just needed to build one stack of navy that was relatively large and have it with a single admiral in order to beat the AI. Now, it doesn't matter how many admirals you have, you commit to your stack more effectively. I think you could also borrow from other stacks, but in either case, what is going to happen is Navy is going to become way more relevant to consideration. Also, now you can blockade market areas, and so this is going to be useful as well. And so Navy overall has gotten stronger. I think in single player, I think it's also probably a lot stronger in multiplayer, but I'd have to think through that and /see that more. If you can borrow from other navies, then building a really big navy overall is going to become a lot more important than it was, whereas before, having a really massively stacked, singular big massively stacked navy was really important. So I do think that the navy techs in general have gotten a bit better, which of course slightly makes the other techs a little bit worse. Also, the line of dock techs is considerably better. In particular, I do think hydraulic cranes is going to be one that is worth actively researching more aggressively than the other ones. It gives you plus 50% traded quantity. Early on, I feel like you're trying to push throughput, you're trying to specialize, and trade is very effective for that. This will increase the amount of trade that you can run by 50%, which is going to help you to specialize quite a bit more and to lean into your particular advantages, especially in a time where trade is going to be most effective in the early game. And as you get later and later, economies will shift a little bit more autarkic. You'll still be able to specialize unless you're absolutely huge. And so I do think bulk trading is not only timely, but it is also proportionally more effective, because once you get to the next version of that, mass scale trading on floating harbor, this is going to give you plus 100%. This is a movement plus from 150% to 200%, which represents a 33% increase over baseline, whereas the previous one was 100 to 150%, which is going to be a 50% increase over the baseline. So in particular, I think that hydraulic cranes is going to be one that you want to actively get relatively early. Also, gantry cranes is going to be a bit stronger, but the 3-tier tech is going to be a little bit pressured. It unlocks industrial port for your ports. If you have done a lot of ports or you're more maritime oriented, it's going to be very nice that you are getting out of that loud car outside and getting into the boat, because you are going to be getting more infrastructure from this. I think this is 40% more per port, and it again is going to also be producing merchant marine, which is going to be making you money. The PM is going to be kind of nice. It's going to be better than the railways for the purposes of making money, I believe, on that level versus a commensurate level. Concrete dockyards, I do think has gotten better, but I think it is less standout relative to these other 3 techs because it uses oil as an input. And so even though it is better, generally your oil starts to get pressured, and it's a tier 4 tech. There's a lot of other really good tier 4 techs. I don't see this one being actively researched anywhere near as aggressive as the other ones, and perhaps the level of aggression in terms of how good they are is just pretty linear, with hydraulic cranes being the best, gantry cranes maybe second, floating harbor third, and concrete dockyard being next, but all of these ones are more of a thing to keep an eye on now. Finally, we have the society techs, which I think have just gotten massively better in a sort of general sense, and that pushing the society techs in general is going to be a lot stronger. Previously, like, the best one was stock exchange for the 20% market access price impact. This is less important as trade centers effectively diminish the negative effects of MAPI or having poor MAPI, and so you can to some extent overcome this with trade, but this is still going to be an outstanding tech. It also unlocks protectionism, which incidentally I think is probably the best trade law, because protectionism allows you to get more stuff via treaties, which is going to be a little bit of a theme as it relates to some of the things in here. If we want to give or take no subventions or no tariffs as an agreement, we cannot be on free trade. Also very significant is going to be non-colonization agreements, where you can also get some value from this. We see that it has been nerfed in 1.8.4 here. This used to be 25 in terms of what you could expect to get out of here, unless this is just he's giving us the lower value and this isn't capped. But this is going to be another thing as well. Colonization is also better just for being able to get those treaties as well, although the Suez Canal is also insane if you do not have colonization, and you probably want to go for it every single time. So that's another reason colonization has gotten a lot better. The really, really kind of important, or the most massive winners, though, are the techs that give you companies and companies' charters. One max number of companies are extremely strong now. They have a lot of different uses. They can hugely buff your investment pool, especially if you can get investment rights in someone else, and use the companies in particular to go after investment rights. And then what they can get is a regional HQ, which will use foreign construction and investment pool to build the buildings, like the regional HQ we have in Leinster. So this is going to be incredibly good, and it's going to be incredibly good to stack up multiple of these. But not only that, you are getting free charters with a lot of these techs. The charters cost 100 authority normally, and so what this represents is also just 200 flat authority, although slightly worse because it's not going to be subject to percentage modifiers. But all the way through, all of these that are increasing the number of companies are going to be quite good. Urban centers are also probably slightly better because you can expect to have more ownership class, which is going to push up the price of services more, which will make services in urban centers slightly better. We can see an additional charter that's effectively 100 authority, and just all the way through, these are going to be quite a bit better. And so this entire line, really important to emphasize. I think most things opened with going for either railways or atmospheric engine, water tube boiler before. I think that was the opener on a lot of countries. I think now corporate charters is going to be much more frequent as an opening, depending on how many tier 1 techs you have researched. If you have a lot unresearched, maybe it's not possible to really go for that first, and you go atmospheric engine and then into corporate charters. But if you have a lot of the tier 1 tech stuff researched first, getting after companies right away is going to be a lot stronger. Also, allowing you to get a canal, the canal companies are quite strong, is civilizing mission. So I do think that this is a slight buff that is worth noting. A buff that is unclear as to how good it is. It might be quite strong to push the needle, or it might not be enough to really adjust your behavior, is all of the influence techs have gotten way better. These used to give either like 5 or 10% influence, something like that. Now the numbers on these are considerably larger, and so it's going to be much better to be going for any of these entire line of techs. But also, I think that we did briefly discuss and talk about getting regional HQs is useful. Being able to go after these and get treaties and negotiate stuff, this is crimped by influence. I think you want to play nice with all the GPs and get these things with all the GPs, especially if you're really small, because if you're small, it's proportionally more value. And what this is going to require is influence. And so these actually might, in some circumstances, be actively worth researching now. I don't think we've actively researched these just about ever before. In particular, behaviorism's plus 50%. It also gives you more maneuvers, which is going to be something that is worth noting, but is not insane. Also, similar to how when we talked about the production techs, how reinforced concrete got a little bit better because you are more polarized in terms of how you want to distribute your construction sectors and this type of thing. The entire modern sewage line is probably a little bit better. I don't think it was super, super good to push beforehand, so it's not necessarily going to push the needle, but in particular, we do think it is a little bit better, and it is going to allow you to choose where your construction is a little bit better, which I think is good with the unincorporated versus incorporated changes to construction speed. Corporatism is one that's going to be significantly better now because it unlocks the corporate state law. In particular, this law is by far, I think, the best governing principle because it gives you access to an additional company and an additional charter. Since it gives you an additional charter, it's effectively a 200 authority governing principle that also gives you +1 max number of companies. So I do think that this is going to be a tech that you go for quite often. There's also slight buffs to both the banking line and the prestige line. The prestige line in particular the authority line rather, is going to be considerably better because authority as a resource is going to be better, but I still think a lot of these techs won't be worth actively researching, and also banking is going to be better in a similar way where it's probably not worth researching directly similar to how it was before, but the extra maximum trade advantage from capacity is going to be a non-zero modifier that does allow you to make more money. More trade advantage is going to mean that you get better prices overall at the expense of other people as far as trades go, but I do think, relativistically speaking, there's so much other juicy stuff to go for that maybe this doesn't even make these techs better, even though they're better in the abstract relatively, because there's so much other good stuff. Maybe they are just about the same or even a little bit worse. And that's how some of the value has changed in terms of the text. If you feel like I've missed something, please feel free to put it down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And other than that, y'all have a good one.